which is not a problem.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's important because those hedges are quite large.
Yes.
And they're actually on village property. We want them replaced with something that's survive.
We would replace them in kind.
And I think really that they should be removed probably sometime after September 1st, when we start getting into cooler weather.
Yes.
Again, as Sheila was saying, with the warm weather, they're going to be stressed even more.
Yes.
All right. Any comments from any other comments on the no? Any comments from anyone in the public on this matter? No, Mary Ann, do you have a resolution?
Yeah, in September 2017, Kay Krimmel and Mitchell Schwartz received site development plan approval to construct an addition and patio at their house at 29 Willow Street, subject to the items listed in the September 6, 2017 Hahn memorandum. And whereas in the course of construction, actually it was prior to construction, but you could say coming for building and as a course of construction, it was discovered that there was a fire hydrant as well as an 8-foot high cherry laurel hedge blocking access to the construction entrance shown on the approved site plan. Applicants applied for revised site development plan approval to move the construction entrance and to remove 6 plants temporarily during reconstruction and replant them in the original location when construction is complete. Hahn Engineering reviewed the plans and in a memorandum dated July 31st listed several issues with the site plan. Nolan Landscape Architects reviewed the plans and in its staff report for the August 1st Planning Board meeting listed several items to be addressed. Was the Planning Board held a public hearing on August 1st, resolved that the Planning Board grants site development plan approval of the improvements reflected in the drawings entitled Krimmel Schwartz Residence prepared by McSee Architecture, and the plans of Hudson Engineering, subject to first compliance with the items listed in the July 27, 2018 Hahn memorandum. Actually, that should be the July 31st. Compliance with the items listed in the staff report of Nolan Landscape Architects, and monitoring the cherry laurel hedge for a minimum of 2 years and replacing any damaged plant with a new cherry laurel plant at least 6 feet high, which must be monitored for an additional 2-year period.
Any comments from any of the board members? Okay. A motion to approve the resolution? Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
We just have to make the change on the date.
Right here.
Next item is 2018-12, 6 West Sunnyside Lane.
Good evening. Good evening. For the record, Brad Schwartz from Zarin Steinmetz, representing the Wurtzels at 6 West Sunnyside. The Wurtzels are on vacation. They aren't here tonight. I'm joined by Ken Anderson, right beside me and behind me, and his team from Banner Architects and my colleague, Caitlin Cialino. So we made a full submission to your board on July 18th that we believe responded to all the comments in the prior Hahn and Nolan memoranda. We outlined some of the highlights of that submission in our cover letter. Just very quickly, we updated a lot of the drawings in response to the comments. We created some new drawings, including the site section from 97 Fargo. Provided many more details on the landscaping, especially in the watercourse buffer, the green roof details. We laid out why we believe we comply with the various permit standards with respect to wetlands, watercourses, flood damage. So we provided a whole lot of information to your board that we believe shows no adverse impact to the project, but also actually shows environmental benefits of the project, again related to the watercourse restoration, stormwater improvements related to the green roof, aesthetics, and the net reduction in overall coverage. So we did get the additional comments from Hahn and Nolan. I think it was yesterday, a lot of technical details that we'll have no problem addressing in a future submission. Through each of the drawings, but I also know a key question coming out of the last meeting was the comparative zoning analysis that your board asked us to conduct. So I'm happy to sort of get right into that and the results of that research that we performed. Grant architects spent a lot of time compiling all the information. The methodology, just very quickly, we laid it out in our cover letter, but the methodology was to take the information from the tax cards on file in the town of Greenberg, and we took the existing coverage from 22 homes within about a half-mile radius, the existing coverage, as well as the heated space. The tax cards don't provide for FAR, so heated space is the metric that we used in lieu of FAR for purposes of this apples-to-apples comparison. And all of the results were compiled in this chart on drawing A7. Each home in this radius of 22 were assigned a letter, and we also provided on drawing A8 an aerial so that each of the homes reflect in the chart. And what we believe, what the results show, is that there really is not a uniform pattern of development within this area. There's various zoning districts, various lot sizes, and various coverages, some which exceed coverage and some which approach the maximum coverage. And then as you get further out, there are other properties that exceed the coverage. So if we focus just on the homes closest to the Wurzel residence, which is A, so here's the Tarrytown, here's the village border, here are some properties in Tarrytown. Parcel B is a large parcel with a very small rental property, rental house, at the very corner of the site. Parcel E, large property and single-family residence. Parcel C, probably most comparable. That's the house in 97 Fargo, a single-family residence that is currently at 112% coverage. So they're over coverage by 12%, and that's our adjoining neighbor. This parcel here that doesn't have a letter is vacant. We believe it's owned by the same owners or a related entity to the owners of parcel E. Interestingly, it used to be part of parcel A, our client's property. This was all one property that was subdivided by approval of the planning board in 1995 as part of the Stephanie Scott subdivision. So the homes most immediately closest to us, we have 97 Fargo in excess of coverage. We're currently in excess of coverage. We're proposing to go up further. And again, we have large lots, small house, all various shaped properties and coverages that exceed. And again, as we go out further into the study area, there are homes that are also in excess in some of our existing coverage. So we think, again, and with the aerial, if it helps to put into some perspective, again, the different sizes. This is a small home here, built a single-family residence on E. Here's 97 Fargo on parcel C. I should mention that the Wurzel's residence is much lower than the existing home on 97 Fargo. Their basement elevation would be higher than the top of our proposed multi-purpose room. So their view would be right over the top of the proposed room, and there's a site section that shows that. Here's their basement elevation, right over the top elevation of the proposed multi-purpose room. So that's really the results of the analysis of the zoning comparison. Again, we think what it concludes is that there is not a uniform pattern of development. This is not based on well-planned and thought-out subdivisions. These were individual lots that were independently developed, and all different sizes, and that were sort of developed on their own. So there's a real wide diversity of properties and coverages. You also asked us to think about and come back and present what makes this project distinct and unique, right? The board was concerned about setting precedent, and we think there are at least three reasons. And the first, and I've already touched upon all these, but the first is the distinct physical setting, right? It's down at the end of West Sunnyside, close to the Irvington border, so the property is sort of isolated from its other neighbors, and given its elevation, it's sort of by itself. It's almost cannot be viewed from West Sunnyside, and there will be no adverse impacts, community character, again, or visual. And there's also extensive vegetation surrounding. I think the physical setting of this site, again, at the end of the road, set down, low elevation, surrounded by vegetation, it can support and accommodate the requested proposal for this multi-purpose room. So the physical setting would be the first unique, distinctive characteristic. Second, I mentioned earlier, all the environmental benefits, right? This is not a project that's just avoiding adverse impacts. We are affirmatively creating environmental impacts. Again, Mr. Janik's reports.
Alleviating, not creating.
I'm sorry?
Alleviating.
Well, we're positive impacts,
Okay.
positive benefits, environmental benefits. Stream restoration, the stormwater, the green roof, the aesthetics, reducing the net coverage overall. So these are all environmental benefits of the project. We're not just mitigating, we're actually having environmental benefits. And the third unique or distinction factor is just the genesis of the request. We had mentioned basement space in this home, the low ceilings, and the basement is largely for mechanical space. So the ask and the desire of the applicant is to have some sizable indoor space for recreation, family gatherings, storage, etc., that currently cannot be used in their basement. So between the physical setting, the environmental benefits, and the lack of usable basement space, we believe are three factors that make this application distinct and would avoid setting any kind of precedent.
That it?
For now.
Okay. Well, I went back and I looked at your sheet number A7, your worksheet for the coverage and for the FAR. And what I did was, I looked at basically from Lot M back to Lot A. I think beyond Lot M, you're really not in the same neighborhood anymore.
Agreed.
It has nothing to do with what's going on in Lot A or any of the other lots.
Mhm.
So if you take a look at just those lots from A to M, and you look at your allowable coverage, first off, I think this coverage figure on your sheet A7, unless it's been changed, I think it's not correct. According to the Han memorandum, the existing coverage is 10,745 square feet, and you're showing 5,258 square feet of coverage.
So the Han memo, and for zoning purposes, right, it's different calculations. All of these numbers, and this is the only way we could do it to have an apples-to-apples comparison. All of these numbers were generated from the tax cards. So that way we were able to compare our existing coverage and the heated space to our neighbors.
Well, that's heated space, but when we're talking about coverage, I mean, you have FAR, which would get to the floor area, opposed to walls or patios or other areas that would be for coverage. So, I mean,
Just, if I can
Maybe
check, the Greenberg cards don't reflect the patio stoops and walks and
okay.
driveways. So to get a fair comparison, they're using just the coverage of
Okay.
buildings. That is, this way you have a uniform
I see.
statistic, and it's not a guess.
All right, well then
It really isn't though, because let's say your client has a lot of patio space that's not included, and then someone else doesn't. It's not reflected. So it isn't an apples to apples. It is that you're taking a specific dimension from a card that says, this is what this card says,
Yep.
and it says it about this. But there should be a big asterisk on that that says, this doesn't include all kinds of patios, pools, things like that.
It does include, there are,
Please just,
Does it?
please use the microphone. I'm
A
just-
lot of the cards do include a little diagram additional to the house that show like a pool or a major patio. They don't get into, you're correct, they don't get into sidewalks and the little minutia things.
Well, then we start discounting this analysis and go back to what our engineer is saying. You have 10,745 square feet, which in essence is 98.9% greater than permitted coverage on the lot. That's almost twice. You have almost 200% coverage on the lot.
Right.
Okay, number one. Then number two, now,
All under permits and COs, right? So I just want to,
No, I understand that.
remind that nothing was done improperly or unlawfully.
prior to the 2003 zoning ordinance changes, okay, which established a the coverage factors and the FAR. And if you read in the zoning ordinance, in Article 22, Section 224-134, the purpose and applicability of residential floor area ratio law. The recent trend of tearing down existing houses and replacing them with larger houses or building large additions to existing houses threatens the appearance and impacts upon quality of life in Irvington. And it goes on to state, the FAR provisions are intended to be applied together with other provisions of the village zoning code, including the provisions for lot coverage and resource protection. Now, resource protection doesn't apply here because you have an existing lot with an existing house on it. So we're not looking at a brand new building that's being constructed, a brand new single-family residence. You're adding on to an existing residence. So resource protection is out. But we are looking at lot coverage and FAR. And when I look at it, what you're telling me and what I'm getting from the information is that you're already at almost 200% of coverage. And what you want from an FAR is, what is it, 6%? 6% greater than what would be permitted coverage. So you not only are going to have to get a variance for your coverage now, but you want an additional variance for FAR. And again, I don't think that what you're doing here in laying out one floor of 2,500 square feet really meets the requirements or really meets the purpose and applicability of the residential floor area law, nor is it really, have you really looked at what is required in terms of a variance here, in terms of the conditions that are needed for a variance? I mean, I think that as I read the conditions for a variance, they go to 5 different items, right? They talk about whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties will be created by granting the area variance. Whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. Whether the requested area variance is substantial. Whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on conditions in the neighborhood or district. And whether the alleged difficulty was self-created, which consideration shall be relevant to the decision of the Board of Appeals, but shall not necessarily preclude the granting of the area variance. Well, let me go back. I go back to then number 3, whether the requested area variance is substantial. Well, I believe it's quite substantial. You've got a house that's existing at 200% of coverage, and now you want an additional variance for floor area ratio. I think that number one, I just think that is substantial. That's substantially over what is permitted.
It's existing at 200% over.
Correct.
The new addition will make it how much, 250%?
No, it'll bring it down, make it 195%.
Okay.
There's overall a net reduction that would actually...
I was just confused at that.
Again, whether the proposed variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical and environmental conditions of the neighborhood or district. I mean, that's questionable. I mean, while you say that you're not creating a precedent, there is a precedent that's being set here in that, if you do some environmental if you do some screening of the property and put a green roof on a building, then it should be allowed to exceed the coverage and FAR of the village zoning ordinance. But I think what the village zoning ordinance was getting at was it wanted to prevent exactly from what you're proposing to do here, which is to create a massive house on this lot. And and going back, one of the things, again, whether the proposed variance, whether the alleged difficulty was self-created. The difficulty here is that you bought a house, or your clients bought a house that was at 200% of coverage. And that is their problem. It's not the village's problem. They should have done their due diligence in buying that house and known that that's the situation. And if they want to come in for a variance, they're going to have a hard time because they exceed the coverage by... So in all of these instances, I don't see that this is the type of development or type of proposal that is really, that we would want to consider on this site. I think also, what have you looked at in terms of alternatives? You're proposing a 1-story, 2,500 square foot building. What about a 2.5-story, 1,200 square foot building? That wouldn't require an FAR. That could be located immediately behind the existing house and wouldn't be seen at all from anyone. I think those are things that haven't been stated here, whether you've looked at that or not. So those are my comments, and I open it up to the other board members if they have other comments, if they agree with me, if they don't agree with me, or if they have additional items that they find are problematic or not problematic.
I've had a
We
problem
did
with
look
this.
at the
Well,
small, I'm sorry.
I've had a problem with this plan from the beginning because of coverage. It's a very unique house, I agree, but the coverage of the lot is, I think it will set a bad precedent for the village.
You know, you have 2,500-foot building, and that the coverage is being offset by the removal, I presume, of 25-plus hundred of patio. I mean, patio coverage and a one-story building coverage is apples and oranges, so
And an unused pool. An unused,
So part of the removals, first of all, is a shed. That's one. Two, the zoning code doesn't differentiate between development coverage and building coverage the way other municipalities do, so it's just coverage. So coverage that's on the surface, coverage that's vertical is treated the same under your code. And the
you can't
removal.
tell me that it doesn't look different.
but I
When you
think,
look at
It could look different, but again, I think here, given the physical properties of the site and the elevation and the vegetation, the views are mitigated. There are no visual impacts. It won't be, someone mentioned that it will be seen. This won't be seen. And Ken, you want to put up just real quick the,
No, we've heard that.
We concede, because I was down that street and you can't see
Can't see
anything, but it's still a building of unusual size, and you can't tell me that the visual effects of a flagstone patio is different than a one-story building at 2,500 square feet.
visual effects from what vantage point? We look at the neighboring sites, and there's no difference in view.
Okay.
I think, again, as I said, you have 200% of coverage, and now you want to go over the FAR for another variance. I think that is excessive, and I think it's brazen on your part to be requesting that, really. I mean, this is utterly ridiculous to add 2,500 square feet all on one level to this lot. And then put a green roof on it and say, oh, it's fine. Look what we're doing here. You could remove that koi pond, you could remove that shed, you could remove that patio, and not even build this thing. And then you'd bring the coverage way down, and then you'd be doing something for the village.
By the way, what's the green roof consist of?
You want to
You have the details of the plan.
In 2 or 3 words, without,
10 inches of soil and it's got an under drain.
and plantings.
Plantings.
Oh, okay, that's all I needed.
Yeah, no, it's not just like big debris.
That's all I needed to know.
There's one specific.
So if you wouldn't mind,
That was enough to know.
so if you wouldn't mind, could we start from the beginning, okay? My understanding is this was a house that was a subdivision. It came to this planning board in 1990 something?
Right.
95? Okay. And it was approved. And I assume that there's drawings somewhere of what was approved at that time. And have we checked to make sure that what was approved is what's actually out there?
It is.
Okay, so we've had other projects that have come here that have asked for relief from the difference of the coverage change. And what we've done is looked at in relative terms of like, here's what the, say, old code said it was, and here's what this new code was about coverage. And then we make sort of a decision based on that, knowing that. I had never heard of any of those projects, and there have been dozens of them that I remember, that was exceeding coverage by that much. I've never seen that. So I was more confused about, does this really, everything there been approved and stuff, but you're saying it is.
We checked the file of the houses to say that.
Prior to the 2003 changes to the ordinance.
So the pre-2003 didn't have FAR.
Right.
Right, and the whole
Coverage
concept,
was calculated differently.
Again, it was all part of one larger lot, so.
we'll get to
Right,
that,
so
we'll
we
get to that.
But we understand that, but I think the village was moving in the direction they didn't want to see this type of development, and that's why they instituted the coverage requirements and FAR requirements that they did in 2003 or 2004, based on the comprehensive plan that was done in 2003. And I think that's what, again, as I read here, the FAR provisions are intended to be applied together with other provisions of the village zoning code, including the provisions for lot coverage. So it's not just looking at FAR separately. It's looking at it combined with lot coverage and all the other factors that go into it.
I mean, you just said something that Lot A and the crosshatch next to it,
That's our lot. All right. Lot A is the Wurzel's property. Go ahead.
yeah, and the crosshatch,
Yep.
but it was at one time part of it.
995, this was the subdivision line created.
But it was at one time part of the original house in
Correct.
95.
Correct,
So the coverage for 95 included the lot that you no longer have.
correct.
So it's so it's even less, it's even higher rather, than
The
if
percentage, what happened as a result of the subdivision, what previously.
your coverage went way up.
Correct.
So it's not really the same.
It's not.
You
it wasn't-
created
it
your
wasn't
own
a-
problem by getting rid of that property.
A predecessor did, but this is not an
Well, I
example.
didn't say you,
all right.
someone did.
This is not an
The
example
property
of a
in-
code provision rendering something non-conforming. This was a result of a subdivision rendering the property non-conforming.
Well, at that time, it wasn't non-conforming. Was it? They wouldn't have,
Correct, because the FAR wasn't at
Right.
the time.
but again, subsequent zoning amendment changes have made this lot non-conforming in terms of coverage.
Thing too about, I read your memo here, and you were very clear about trying to, portray it as that one of the most important aspects of this thing is it's not visible.
Mhm.
Okay, and that sort of allows you the freedom of doing this. So I take it a little differently in that, then that really means what you're saying is, I can do whatever I want. There is no restriction, because what you're trying to say is you're not going to see it, so basically I can do whatever I want in there. And that's where I go, wait a second, this village figured out that coverage wasn't enough, because it is like what you're defining, it's just a block, okay? Then they figured out, you know what, we need to kind of signify the difference between bulk and coverage, and they came up with this. That's the whole mix. So you can't say, like what you're coming in is basically saying, I have this coverage and I want to make it FAR. It's thanks to what they were trying to do. The spirit of this resolution was to curb this kind of conversation. It was to show you guys that that's not how the matrix works. And then to come here and say it's not visible, well then, to me, if the code said it's not visible, you can do whatever you want. It doesn't. It doesn't say anything like that. And it also becomes, look what's right next door that's empty. Do you don't think someone's going to come here after you try to get 200% coverage, and they're going to want the same thing? And they'll plant as many trees as they can. So to say it isn't a precedent, to say that it is because it's basically invisible, to me, and to go back to like trying to redefine what FAR is, to me is a little kind of crazy. I like Bowl better.
Proposal that requires the planting of trees, under your hypothetical, there's between the existing elevation, the existing
But the
vegetation.
trees could go. The trees, there could be a nice big storm, and guess what? Those trees are gone. Then what happens?
Those trees have survived for however long.
Hypothetically, I'm just going through what, you're using this as like the moat to develop whatever you want. Okay, you're using the guise of this green obscures whatever you do, and therefore you can do anything you want. I would say if that's the case, and if that's true, you should be putting up much bigger proposal. I would. If that was an argument that worked, I don't know why you stopped.
You design what fits for a site, and I think, again, here, given its location, the elevation, the vegetation, I understand the goals and objectives of the village comprehensive plan and the reason for these zoning amendments. But on this property, each site, each own merits. And so here, I think this site, given all the factors we identified, can accommodate this request. You want us to look at alternatives, tweak it some, we could look at that. But this is not, it's not just a black and white rule. If you exceed the FAR, it's a no-go. That's why there's zoning boards for variances. And the coverage, again, is already at the 100% overage. And where we think we are removing coverage that is aesthetically deficient, that the pond, by removing it, will enhance, again, the watercourse buffer. There will be improvements to the site and the environment as a result of some of this swap. Again, the zoning code doesn't differentiate between development coverage and building coverage. I get the practicality that horizontal surface coverage is different than vertical. I get it, but as a result of removing some of that surface horizontal coverage, there are benefits that would accrue. So I think you have to look at the entire package.
But you also have to look at what the bulk is that you're proposing, regardless of these. I understand your argument, you say the trees are there, but if they're not there, for whatever reason, which is something this board has to look at, because it could happen, that we have to understand kind of the bulk of what you're proposing. And even with in your A7 that you kind of nicely strategically showed and talked about percentages, I find that you're at 102 based on your numbers.
Again, under the
I
tax
know,
code.
now we're talking about just the
Right.
tax. Right next to you is C is at 112, D is at 58, F is at 105, G is at 65, I is at 64, H is at 98, J 98, 61, 97, 90. If you take the averages of these things, they're all below 100%. You are asking, based on this, to be pretty much the Mac Daddy here. In fact, the Mac Daddy. You want to go up to, what is it, 100? What is it, 147? There's nowhere, anywhere in this neighborhood,
Well,
on those notes, based on that number, that's even close to that.
I heard the chairman say that sort of Lot M was sort of, you're
That's right.
defining, you're defining,
Lot.
I understand that, but in terms of this half-mile radius, there are other properties that are also identified in red that are actually greater than.
Right, and we can go to Bedford too, and we can find them there. All right, so we're talking
And
about.
a half
what
mile
we're
radius
caring
is a
about.
normal study area for these, we carefully chose a half mile, that is a typical study area for these kinds of
I noticed
visual
you used all
analysis.
these other houses in
Yeah,
here.
you didn't use every lot in it.
You were very,
Half mile radius.
strategic.
You only-
If we wanted to be that strategic, we wouldn't have shown a 39%,
No.
so,
But I think going beyond the coverage, if we go beyond the coverage, and let's go to your FAR then, which again, you're showing your proposed heated space at 88% on your table here, at 7,217 square feet. And we'll go apples to apples here, once again, and again, through lots A through M, the closest lot to you at 88% would be at 66% FAR. So you're 22% larger than any other lot in terms of FAR from A to M. Again, I think it is grandiose, excessive, brazen, bold, whatever you want to call it. It's over the top. And if you want, I'll tell you, again, a little bit to the other members too, but my factor is, I think you need to go back and change this. And if you don't want to change it and you want to go to the ZBA, then you're free to do that. But just be aware, you've heard what we've all said, and there will definitely be a memo from this board to the ZBA expressing our concerns about it. So that's where we're at. That's where I'm at as far as this project is concerned. Any other comments from the board
You
members?
know, you keep saying that it's not visible from anywhere else. I'm not impressed with that, because if someone is looking for it, they're going to find it. If someone else is going to be building in that area, they're going to look at it. So just because you don't see it when you're looking straight ahead or wherever, I'm not impressed with that.
Well, I think you are going to see it as you're driving out of the driveway of the Sunnyside Estate. You're going to be looking right up the driveway of this project, and that addition is going to be right at the top of the driveway. And while we haven't talked about it, because I think we're concentrating on coverage and FAR, there are several large, major trees on that property that are coming down as part of this project. So what is actually going to be seen? You know, again, I've seen so many of these, you know, where you superimpose the building into what's out there now, and they're not realistic because there's going to be several trees at least that are going to be gone, and one I think is a 40-inch tree, which is major. So
I agree with the chairman in the substance. Not sure about the bold, but certainly in the substance. And exceptions are problematic. You give an exception and they become exponential after that, to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Johnny did that. Why can't I do it? You know. And I really am very hesitant about large exceptions because they tend to get bigger tomorrow.
Any other comments from any board members? Any further comments, or we can open up, I don't know if there's anyone here from the public who wants to speak about this.
I just think that it's very important to try to either move past this hurdle or to move past. And I think there's no point in sort of talking about all the other attributes, which some are very commendable and stuff like that. But I think that here it really is about specifically this site and the act of adding FAR that is in excess, in essence, of almost 200% of what's there. So coverage, okay? And now, part of the thing is, the clear thing that happens here very specifically with your house too, is that it's full of two-story spaces in here. And then the aspect of saying that there aren't alternatives that have been expressed and the deficiencies of this basement, you know, that hasn't even been looked at. You know, you have crawl spaces over there. And it seems like it has been no exploration of, in essence, keeping the structure and working around, as opposed to building some new bulk inside of here, because in my opinion it's just too big.
So if we went back and worked on the FAR, and I just want to make sure we walk out of here tonight with the clear, the message has been sent, but if we come back with a compliant FAR.
No, I think it goes beyond that, because you're 200% of coverage. I think you really need to bring it down, to do something that, if you really want to say that you're doing something, you know, to improve the environment, I think you got to bring the coverage back down considerably. And again, that starts, again, looking at, you have a one-story building at 2,500 square feet. Well, what happens if you make that 2.5 stories and tuck it in over the existing patio?
Now
Now,
you count the same, because
well, no, but you'd still be removing the koi pond, you'd be removing the shed. I mean, those are the things you're saying you want to do, and you're using those just as an offset so you can get the coverage, slightly lower, or are you really looking to do something environmentally sensitive?
I hear you, that would work on coverage, but FAR would double, so
Well, but you,
essentially
but
it'd be the
you,
same
but
FAR.
right now, you're proposing to be 6% over FAR, 6% of the 10,000 square feet, so you had 600 feet. So what happens, you take 600 feet off your 2,500 square feet, you're at 1,900 square feet. You can't make it these people can't make it at 1,900 square feet additional space? I mean, come on, I think that's why I say it's excessive.
Here's the thing, is this is not a negotiation about something. What you came in and proposed something that you've heard that there's considerable disagreement about your premise. So if you intend to come back, feel free. This is like a negotiating, like you were trying to allude to, like if we come back with the FAR down, we're okay. No, that's not how it works. There are people here that are pretty adamant about the premise of what you're doing seems to be disingenuous for the village, especially the way that the zoning has been redone to purposely try not to have projects like this. So you have to come back, if you want, and come back with a proposal that is more in the spirit of what the zoning was, or it was changed to be. The inception of FAR versus coverage, and to work that, and to figure out, and to prove to us that no, this will not have such an impact on this site and potentially other sites.
Any other comments from the board members? No? I think you've heard where we're at with this.
Your feedback.
Last item is 2018-15, 3 Shady Lane.
The photo of the sign, I'm not going to do this.
You can take it out if you're more comfortable.
Okay, great. So, I'm Brandon representing Michael Lewis Architects and also the owners Brooke Bridges and Andre Frank. You'll notice this site plan, which one of the comments was that we need to make it twice as big. It's quite small, so my apologies. But and some of you may recognize the project. It was before the boards 3 or 4 years ago. The owners did an extensive renovation on the first and second floors. As part of that, we designed, we put in the piping for a new sprinkler system to eventually lead to the attic, for a new stair that would lead up there as well. So that's the impetus of the whole project, is to provide move the owner's study up to that area. They have twin sons that are soon to be teenagers, so they're expanding rapidly. So the back, which you can see here, and then other items that they'd like to propose at the same time is a kitchen addition and a new deck with a basement or a cellar expansion also below, and a covered front porch with some new plantings and a retaining wall to kind of soften what's there now is just all asphalt all around the front of the building. And then also this additional paved parking area at the front of the lot. So, and here you'll recognize, you've all seen the plans. This is what's proposed at the cellar at the lower level. Just adding a bathroom and some additional space for a rec room with access to the back. And a little trash storage area underneath the proposed covered front porch. This also shows the bump out here for the kitchen and dining addition and the new deck, and the proposed retaining walls and plantings. The initial thing to show here is, you'll notice we're calling out on the drawings, we're anticipating needing variance for the side setback, which was also mentioned in Doug and George's comments. The property line runs down the middle of the driveway, and so once you take the setbacks from there, this corner of the house is non-conforming. So with this proposed cantilevered roof projection, we're still, even with the 30-inch provision that's allowed in the code, we're still non-conforming there. The more natural boundary is this retaining wall, which is quite high, and so we know that that's going to be probably necessary to go for a variance on.
Excuse me, you said half the driveway is not your property?
That's right. Yeah, the line drives right up there.
Who owns it? You got an easement? Or?
I don't know. It was a farmhouse. I don't know the construction date, but it predates all of the zoning, and so yeah, we're not sure when it's a dry set stone retaining wall. So
who owns the land besides the natural, but the retaining wall?
The property over here does, technically.
House on Park Road.
Yeah, and it's been before the board recently as well, right? I think there was a...
Presumably they own to the middle of your driveway.
That's right, yeah. So...
That's not troublesome to the owner?
Yeah, more drainage issues from up there running onto the site. But I think, I don't know, for whatever reason, that's where the line was drawn. I don't know if it was drawn before the driveway was there or after. This road used to be a carriage path that led to what we believe to be the property above. But we're really not sure as to why that's set there instead of at the more natural place for it.
Well, the created natural. It's a retaining wall, right?
Right, yeah.
So it's not really natural.
Right. Well, it would seem that would be where
Okay.
That's what I mean by natural. It would seem that would be where it would be, but the surveys tell us otherwise. Also, mentioning the surveys, that was the very first comment, and we agree it's a weird, with those two surveys for the two lots that overlap we agree that it's a little bit convoluted, and when we pieced it together, we believe we know how they fit, but we think it's a valid comment that we're pursuing to get a new survey of the entire property that shows both lots clearly. On this sheet, here's the second floor. It shows the new stair and a couple of new windows, and then the finished attic study with the stair coming up, and here's where the shed dormer pops up. And that provides just barely a 7'6". The 7'6" line is right near the ridge beam and sloping down to 7'3", and then on this side it gets even less. So that's the attic. And then in the elevations, here we can see the covered front porch. Here it is in profile. You can also see that the house sits on a fairly steeply sloping site. And on the last sheet, again, here we can see the shed dormer in profile, and here's the front of the shed dormer, and here's the kitchen addition and the cellar expansion. There's also, they're proposing a metal roof to be installed on the entire house. And for our height calculations, I saw there was questions on that as well. Because of the grade within the footprint of the building, which we calculated to be somewhere between 15 and 20%, and with the steepness of the main roof, our understanding of the code was that we would be able to use average grade as our measuring point, as long as we stay below 40 feet overall from the lowest point. And so that was our interpretation of the code. But we're happy to show the diagrams and calculations in our next submittal to address all of the comments that were given.
And remember, that calculation is for the building envelope, not the building envelope. In other words, the zoning envelope.
I'm not sure I follow.
In other words, it's not the envelope of the building.
Oh, yeah.
It's the building envelope. In other words,
Not the footprint.
Not the footprint of the building. We're talking about the zoning envelope.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Which?
Has to have the
setback.
take the setback from the property and give us a total.
Oh, I see.
Of the property without the setbacks and show us the calculations.
Oh, okay.
See if it qualifies for the 40.
So everything within the setbacks
Right.
to find the average slope. Got
You
it.
can send it. You can send it over whenever you want. Just email it to me.
To check it. Okay.
Yeah, that way you don't have to wait.
Yeah. We will. That sounds good.
But you're gonna have to get a survey. So it's gonna.
Yeah, of course. And the survey will provide more accurate topo lines as well. That'll help us to make sure we're interpreting everything
Your
correctly.
survey will probably do the numbers for you.
Yeah.
What's
Right.
the roof height now?
What's that?
What's the roof height now, current roof height?
34'5". Oh, that's what we're proposing. From the lowest grade to the ridge is 39'3".
Current.
Existing. Yes.
Existing.
Yes.
And you're not looking to raise the roof height? You're just
That's
looking
correct.
to- Okay.
That's correct. The shed dormer exists below that ridge.
Andrew, do we know if they meet the height, or is there's still some question about whether?
If they,
Well, it depends
if
what-
it depends on
Right.
him demonstrating, he can use the exception in the code. Right now, if you're not using the exception in the code, the existing exceeds, and he's expanding the existing, but he's not adding to the existing above.
Not increasing the
So he's increasing the
non-conformance.
nonconformity, but he's not increasing the need of the variance.
And to apply for that, we would need to show that the average grade, as defined, as you say, is greater than 15% within the boundaries described.
So he's got to get a survey. He's a new
Yeah.
observation.
And,
Did all this.
and that the main roof has a slope steeper than 5 to 12, over 80%. Those are the things that we would need to do in order to be able to measure from the average grade instead of the lowest point. So we're happy to work with the surveyor and with Han to figure out what's real.
And stories too. We need.
And the stories, yes, as well.
Any comments from any of the board members?
Yeah, it's very minimal information on the parking area.
Oh, yeah.
And your contours are, it says steep, but it was hard to follow because of lack of contours down by the...
Right, it flattens out quite a bit in this zone.
Is that curved, so it's all going to the drainages go into your system?
Yes, and we're in anticipating their twin sons growing. They're anticipating needing parking, and also the sons are avid hockey players, so they want a place to play as well. So that's another secondary purpose for it. And this happens to be the flattest area of the site, so that's why it's located there. Yeah, possibly.
Make sure you get street hockey or ice hockey.
Is there a place that, is there another, it's kind of odd seeing the parking lot.
Yeah.
Is there another example that we know of that's done something like this? I don't.
Of adding a paving area like
The
that?
only thing that's a little bit is the house just up the street on Harriman Road that we just approved a couple of months ago, where there was the question, Ed, about the sewer line running through the property. I think they wanted to create sort of a parking area right next to Harriman Road, and we asked
That's
them
a
actually to
required
push it
park.
back. Pardon me?
The definition in that is required parking.
That was part of it.
That was required, right, but we also asked them to push it back.
Yeah.
From the road, though. And this, though, this driveway is how many feet long? I mean, you go past several houses to get all the way up
Well,
to
it's
that house.
the tail end of Shady Lane, right?
Yeah, it's the very end of it.
So how close is the nearest house to that parking area? To the south of it, or to the?
The closest house would be around here.
Which is how many feet?
Where's that garden? There's like a garden.
Yeah, they have a garden a little bit closer to the house.
Never mind.
So,
Before the garden.
yeah, before the garden. And
We're good with that.
we're flexible on the placement of it too. If it, we were looking at what the required setback is from the property line, but if there are other things that the board's deem that would be better, we can slide it in this zone a little bit if we need to. So.
Yeah, the only other question, council, are we okay with half the driveway not being on their property?
That's between them and their neighbors.
Yeah, I mean,
There's
that's,
another approval we went through.
Nope.
No,
There's no
that's
easement.
been there forever. This is, I've been up there.
Oh.
yeah.
I mean, we would if they were doing work, there.
Yeah, if they're working on it or
That would
proposing it.
require, but
Oh, of
not-
course.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're not doing any work there.
It's an interesting question. I'm anxious to see. The last surveys that were done was one of them was 66 and the other was 2011. So it'll be interesting to ask the surveyor as well if there are markers or anything else, like if the property line used to be there, or it's really confusing. But so I hope to find something out.
Any other comments? Well, I don't think there's anyone in the public here to.
I know, there's not enough angry neighbors.
Yeah.
For the record, no, there was no public.
So I guess you should just address all the
Work on
comments
it.
in Han's memo and see if we,
Come back.
see if we can resolve everything, and then come back with the revised site plan next month or the month thereafter.
Great.
Take it from there.
Will do.
Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Great. So with that, request a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned.